Now that Secret of the Mimic is out, I think my biggest question so far is just, what is this guy? Who is this? And while we do have some scraps of evidence here we can sort through, not everything lines up perfectly. Throughout the game, we can find some messages referring to this thing that's hidden underneath the retail showroom. One of the things we learn is that somebody got stuck down there during the night shift and the poor soul is getting really hungry. But it seems that nobody responds and this worker likely dies. If that's the case, is this worker possessing this suit? It almost seems implied, except that there's no mention of them being in a suit. So it almost seems like there are several other options possibly going on here instead. Also, the area seems intentionally closed off. So did Edwin close off this area? Did somebody else? Did the mimic stuff this worker into the suit, like it did with the other workers it killed? And if so, why does this one come to life or something, while the others don't? I think it's also significant to keep in mind that this is where one of David's precious belongings is kept hidden as well. Almost like this Moon character is protecting it, maybe even possessive of it. It's like they can't seem to let it go, maybe. We learn in the moon.exe, which is a whole other discussion in itself, that Edwin is very clearly supposed to represent at least the Moon character, so it's not unreasonable to keep Edwin in the picture as a potential candidate for who is inside that suit. The fact that this character is constantly stuck singing a lullaby that was presumably sung to David strengthens the idea even further. So what if the Mimic brings Edwin down here after the explosion that happens with the Mimic and Edwin, where Edwin's unable to feel his legs so he can't walk? Then after this, the Mimic drags Edwin down here, stuffs him into the suit, and locks him up in an ironic twist of fate, leaving his actual body down here forever. This could even mirror the tales from the Pizzaplex books, where Edwin is locked inside the storyteller tree, ultimately dying there. In the same way, he's locked under the retail showroom and unable to leave in the games. One thing to note is that this area is beneath the theater, which is where Edwin in the games proudly announces all the AI stories that are created here. And just like the storyteller tree, whether that's relevant or not, I don't know, but I thought it was fun to make that connection. The fact that this moon is in a sense protecting David's ball could also be indicating a stronger tie to David personally, which would again imply that this is Edwin in the suit. One counter though is that if Edwin's limbs weren't working properly, how would this be Edwin? The moon guy's walking around super fast. The character also clomps around quite a bit. It's not quite as loud of footsteps as the regular mimic though, but it is still fairly loud and shakes the camera somewhat. And if that's the case, to me it seems more likely that if this was Edwin, the mimic would have taken Edwin's limbs off and replaced them with fake ones or artificial ones, just like the mimic has done for himself. But we have to think about other possibilities as well. And if it's not Edwin and it's not an employee, this could actually just be the mimic. One would have to question how the mimic got down here, but I also questioned many times throughout the game how the mimic got into a room that I had just sealed the door shut to with a data diver. It could just be a gameplay mechanic where the mimic does in fact make it down here with us and is simply using the only costume that's down here. But the more likely idea is that if you actually look above you when you're down here, you can actually see the theater from way up there. So technically the mimic could have easily climbed down here and then just hopped into the moon suit, just quoting lines that he knows this character would have said. But here's the thing. If the mimic is mimicking this character, what was this character originally created for? It seems like they're personally connected to David in the sense that their whole purpose is singing lullabies. That's literally all this character can seem to do is sing lullabies, and it's essentially like a big glowing nightlight in a sense. So it has to be connected to David if that's where we're going with that idea. But on the flip side, it could just be that this is just like the elephant or the mushroom, where it's just one more character that the mimic already knew how to act like when it gets inside of the suit. But so far we have the employee, we have Edwin, and the mimic as our suspects for who could be using the suit. We could also add on that this creature came to life through Edwin's agony as a possibility. If nearby objects can be affected and possessed by agony, it's not out of the question that David's ball is fueled with agony or something, and therefore the moon animatronic comes to life through that. I don't know. But that is kind of stretching it, but I don't want to throw anything out at this point. Last but not least though, something we really do need to talk about before we end this is maybe the most important thing, and that is the moon.exe game. Specifically though, when the Jester Moon statue is being created in that game, as the last piece is put together, the moon statue sings and is reborn. It glows and glows until you know nothing but white. So it's singing and it's glowing. Both of these things line up perfectly with our mysterious moon man under the showroom. Maybe even more significant is what happens next. Once we've awakened in this EXE game, we are told that you rebuilt yourself, but now you are split in two: moon and sun, destruction and life. So the moon down here is nothing but destructive, which means our singing moon guy, we have a singing moon that glows and is destructive. It seems to line up pretty nicely with the moon.exe description here, but we aren't finished yet. We next need to discuss the letter that we find once we're down here with this warbling orb. The letter reads as follows: memory error, detail report. We were expecting ... There were complications ... Consciousness was lost for an undetermined time. Once I woke, we were all together and happy, a family, but something was different. I felt wrong somehow. Was I me? I would never sleep again. Corrupted file suspected. Please advise. I specifically want to point out that we were expecting and that there were complications, the wording of these two things. Neither of these are too crazy in context, but it's important to note that both of these terms are very often used in relating to childbirth. We were expecting is often like when you're expecting a child before they're born. Expecting a child is a common phrase that people will use for that. And there were complications often refers to when the birth doesn't go as planned. And the reason I have to bring this up now is because when the statue is created in the moon.exe, it specifically states that the moon statue sings and is reborn. The terminology of this letter then suddenly has very high significance, as this is clearly connected to the rebirth of the statue. The important takeaway being that while the birth, for lack of a better word, was successful in one sense, there were indeed complications. As the moon.exe explains immediately after, you are now split in two, moon and sun, destruction and life. And so this moon character could very possibly be the destructive moon the game is referring to. So in a sense, it's like this moon is like a physical manifestation of part of that split that happened during this birthing process. This was the complication, part of the complications that occurred, essentially. And whatever character this is referring us back to then becomes part of the mystery. Is this talking about Fiona's rebirth? Is this David's rebirth? Is this talking about something that happened to Edwin during this process? It's kind of up to how you interpret the events leading up to and after this whole thing. I'll share my own perspective on what that is in another video, but I feel like it's going to take way too long if we try to discuss that here. The last thing I want to add is an odd connection the note makes to the Edwin from the books. In the books, Edwin loses 2 weeks of his life after David has passed. Edwin has no memory of much of anything from that time. Edwin also has trouble doing the most basic of tasks, such as standing up, getting to the bathroom, and getting through a normal morning routine. It then describes how, when Edwin faced his mirror, he wasn't surprised to be looking into the eyes of a stranger. He didn't feel like Edwin anymore. He felt like a husk. He looked like one too. When he tries to start working again, he picks up some pliers, but for the life of him, he is unable to remember how to grip them. It's as if something is wrong with Edwin. And just like the letter we find down here states, consciousness was lost for an undetermined amount of time, just like Edwin loses 2 weeks of his life in the books, but awakens afterwards. But something was different. I felt wrong somehow. Was I me? It sounds eerily similar to what happens to Edwin in the books. It just comes across a little more subtle in the books than in this note. The rest of Edwin's story also makes multiple mentions of his struggle with sleep, which I also find weirdly relevant as the note states I would never sleep again. Anyway, make of all that what you will. What do you think of this character though? How do you think it connects to the story? Part of me wonders if it's literally just like a symbolic part of someone being split mentally or like supernaturally and then manifesting in the real world. I don't know. It all depends on how complex FNAF wants to go with this. It could be soul splitting, it could be like all kinds of things. There's so many ways to interpret this character in the story, and I want to hear your thoughts. So thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe and have a fabulous day.